On the Sober Strong podcast today, we have Chris. She's approaching 2 years sober, and it's been a healing journey for her. So let's hear her story. Let's go back to dry September 2023. And what inspired you to do dry September?
So it was at the end of the summer. So, it had been one of those summers that we had a lot of activity. It seemed like every weekend there was something going on. My friends and I, just different things. We went to a country concert. We did a girls trip in Nashville. We had, it just seemed like over and over there was stuff going on, and it had been a heavy drinking summer. And so by the end of the summer, I was kind of like, I need a break. And what had really intrigued me was at the time I was on Weight Watchers, WW, and they have a social aspect to that. And one of the women that I followed had done a dry June. And then she had stuck with it because she said how much better she felt and how good it was and everything. And I was very intrigued by that because it had never occurred to me that I could just stop drinking. It was one of those things that I wasn't a rock bottom situation. It wasn't that it was really having this major impact on my life, but I felt like crap. And there was a lot of, but I feel like as you get older, the hangovers just get worse and everything else that goes along with that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do what she did. And I'm going to do a 30-day dry September and then see how it goes from there. I wasn't planning on sticking with it. I wasn't planning on making a huge life change. I just wanted to reel it in. I just thought, I need a break and I need to do this for my body and from a health perspective. So that was kind of where I got started.
But then you started drinking again.
I did. So yes. So I made it through September and it was really good. I actually, because it made me go through those first few events without a drink in my hand because that was a habit. It's a habit to walk into a business networking event and reach for a glass of wine. It's a habit to go out to dinner with friends and order, a margarita or whatever. And so just breaking those habits of having to consciously order something different and know that I had to do something different. That was a big part of what I got out of that first 30 days was wow, I can do this. I really tried to fly under the radar though, and not really draw much attention to it. Cause I really didn't know what my end game was. And so then at the end of the month, I was feeling really good. And I thought I'm going to really try to stick with this and see how long I can go. Well, we had a vacation planned the first week of October and that was hard. I wasn't ready for that, because I just associated relaxing with having drinks, hanging out by the fire with friends that we were with on this trip and stuff. And I got really kind of frustrated and angry with myself that I couldn't do it and that I was really, it was hard. So I ended up going back to drinking, going back to it that trip. And then I just told myself, I can be different. I can moderate because I had done some research during that 30 days that I was dry and the things that I was learning was all the things that alcohol does to your body and how difficult it is to moderate. And I thought, you know what, I'm different. My drink is not that bad. I can handle it. And I tried moderation through the end of the year. I used the app, that Sunnyside app that kind of tracked my drinking and stuff. And I just felt like by the end of the year, it was work. It was work to always be thinking about how much I was going to drink, how much was I not going to drink, and really planning my drinks ahead of time and then sticking to it. And I just kind of felt deprived along the way as well when I was out. So by the end of December, I'm like, that's it. I'm done with this whole thing. I got to go back to trying dry January. And so I went back to it, went to dry January. And then this time around, I had more sticking power and made it through. And I just kept saying, and I just kept extending it. Okay, well, maybe I'll go 90 days and see what happens. Maybe I'll go 6 months and see what happens. I never said I was doing it for good. I just did little increments at a time. And when I got to the end of that increment, I was like, well, then I'll reassess. And here we are. It'll be coming up on 2 years now.
So it was just dry January. It wasn't a New Year's resolution. I know earlier I said tradition, but I meant resolution. And what was different about this 30 days prior to the September one? I know that you said you'd gone through it and it's just stuck better. What do you think made you it stick better?
I think for me, it was, the first 30 days that I had done in September, I realized how much better I felt. I realized, I wasn't bloated. I didn't have an upset stomach. I didn't have to wake up with a headache. I just, felt better about my choices. I had more energy. I was sleeping better, all those things. And so then when it became, then came through the moderation, it was, is it harder than I anticipated to really, I always thought I could moderate. We've always played those games of, I'm not going to drink during the week. I'm just going to drink on the weekends, or when I go out, I'm just going to have beer. I'm not going to drink anything hard, or, all those rules and all those things that I had done for years and years and years, trying to just control it. And then realizing that over that period of time that I really controlling it, which in my mind meant, having 2 or 3 drinks when I went out, was really harder than I thought. And because I had failed at controlling it for all those years. So it like I said, it became more like work, and it felt more like, deprivation. Everybody else is getting to drink what they want, but I have to stop or whatever, or I want another one, but I can't have one. So it was just when it came January again, or at that time, I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this again, and I'm going to see if I do it again. And I'm committed to trying this longer and really assessing, how this makes me feel, then see if I can stick with it. And that's what I did.
So I know that a lot of us use that, like, I'm just going to moderate my alcohol, and like through my sober journey and everything that I've been learning, it's like once we try to control it, it just doesn't work.
Right.
And it leads people, I think, in the way opposite direction, because you mentioned deprivation, and it was just like, it's just sucking the life out of you, because you're like, well, I shouldn't, maybe I should, or maybe I just have one. But then it just leads to like more than one. I don't know what type of drinker you were. So were you...
Yeah. I was a very social drinker. I think that was my game, or at least that's what I thought it was. I was very much, I didn't drink at home very often. So, little backstory was that, when I have 3 children, and they are all in their 20s now. When they were young, I didn't drink it. My husband and I decided that, we just didn't want that to be the story around our kids and stuff. So we really didn't drink when our kids were young. And so when they got older and they started being more independent, they could drive, they could do things on their own, they could go places, they didn't need us to be around as much. They were doing sports, they were doing whatever, they were working. Then, you start having this free time all of a sudden again. And it's like, well, what do I do with this free time? I'm going out with friends and I'm doing things that kind of reminisce, for me anyway, were reminiscent of, my college days or my early 20s before I had kids, which was a time that I drank heavily. So, and partied a lot. So it kind of just felt like, oh, we're getting back to our roots a little bit. Like, this is the stuff I'd put on hold for 20 years. And now I can do it again. And, we're having a lot of fun going out, going to concerts, to girls' weekends, to different things with all the moms of all my kids' friends, that we had been hanging out with. So, we were all kind of in the same phase at the same time. And so that's kind of what I reverted back to, I think, was the same kind of drinker that I had been before, which I like I said, I didn't have a rock bottom moment. I didn't have that, but I just knew that it just didn't make me feel good. And it was becoming more and more frequent. Like, the frequency was escalating all the time. And the way just like I said, my hangovers were just getting worse. And the way I felt about myself was getting worse. And I just think there was a mental health aspect of it as well, that there was more anxiety that I was producing. Didn't really know it, but, and it just got to a point that I knew I needed to change something. Something had to give.
So I like how you said you didn't hit rock bottom. I feel like for a lot of us that I talk to, that is like a big thing. It's like, well, I haven't hit rock bottom, or everybody like brings it up. I haven't hit rock bottom. Like
Right.
stereotypical alcoholic
Right.
is
Right.
rock bottom. And I
Mm-hmm.
always say like that paper bag, like bottle with a paper bag against the brick wall.
Yeah.
But
Right.
like for a lot of us, I feel like it's like alcohol controlled our life more than we
Mm-hmm.
realized it. And
Mm-hmm.
for all these years, um, there doesn't have to be a rock bottom to quit.
No. No, there doesn't. And that was, I think, what I got out of, following that woman on social media that was showing that she had quit. And she didn't have a rock bottom moment either. I don't think about it. It was just like, wow, you can actually just walk away from it. Like it was
Yeah.
like mind blowing to me. Like, because I always thought, well, I've got my life under control. It's not that bad. I just have to figure this out. That was the thing. I just kept telling myself, I just got to figure this out. And of course, like you said, it just had more control and it had more of a pull that I wanted it to have. And that idea of just walking away from it just was like, that's what I need to do.
Mm-hmm. I have somebody, I think she's a distant relative, and something stuck with me. And she said, well, for our generation, because she is probably older than you, but that generation of drinkers, she's like, good for you guys for quitting younger because you can do it. But all of you that stop in your 50s, 60s, and some that even stop in their 70s, I'm like,
Right.
that's no excuse. It's just a number.
It's just a number. It is, and yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm 55, and yeah, I stopped, like, it was 2 years ago, so I was 53. But it's just a number, and it's just habit is what it is, and it's just figuring out how to break those habits. And that's what my first year of giving up alcohol was. I was bound and determined that I was not going to change my social life. I was still going to do all the things that I wanted to do. I just wasn't going to do them, with alcohol. And I did, but I also found along the way that some stuff that I was doing, I think I must have just been doing it because there was drinking there. And it was like, oh, well, hey, we're going to go and have drinks. We're going to go do this, and I'll tag along. And now that that's not the draw, I have found that maybe that really isn't what I want to be doing. So it's been, more of a process of really uncovering. I keep kind of referring back to my authentic self. Like, I had no idea. After raising kids and a career and all that stuff, I was people my age, as you say, have probably been playing all these roles. I feel like we played all these roles for so many years, and who I was totally lost. Like, I was, involved with a swim team because my kids did swim team. I was involved with all the different events that they were involved in. I was, that mom that helped plan all the stuff. And I just, church stuff, whether it was the, kids program, I was involved in that. It's like whatever it was needed to fulfill what the expectation of a good mom or whatever it is, I was involved. And I loved it. It was great. I don't regret a minute of it. But when it was all done, I was like, well, it was kind of, I don't know if call it a midlife crisis or what, but it was like, well, who am I now? And so I think I was a little bit lost for a little while trying to figure that out. And now that was like my whole year too. I think first year of going alcohol free was like, well, this isn't as fun as I thought it was. And now year two has been like, okay, what do I really want? What is it that I'm looking for? And as I said earlier, there's been a lot of healing and stuff from things from years ago that I just never took the time to deal with. And so anybody, I don't care what your age is, if you're, wanting to just really dig in deeper and get a higher sense of what's important to you and what your priorities are and what you're all about, this has been a fantastic journey for that.
Yeah. I feel like so many people don't understand that getting sober comes with healing. And I mean, I don't know what your past is. And I mean, I know some people have very traumatic
Yeah.
childhoods
Yeah.
and, even like, for decades they have trauma, but they never heal themselves. They just turn to the bottle and that's
Right.
where they're going to die. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
don't want to get help. They don't
No.
want to reach for help, ask for help, figure it out. They just think that alcohol is the solution to their problem.
Correct. And I don't know, and so I will share if you don't mind a little
Yeah.
bit. So, when I was in my, well, I'm like, where do I start with this? I grew up in New Hampshire, grew up in the mountains of New Hampshire. Loved it. It was a very outdoorsy, upbringing, and started drinking a little bit in high school, not a lot. But when I got to college, then, party scene was definitely a big deal. And that's probably where my drinking escalated probably rather quickly. I do remember even when I was in college questioning myself a little bit and having friends tell me that they thought I was drinking too much, especially when I was going through, it was like my first real boyfriend, first real breakup, and I think I had some difficulty coping with that, and alcohol was the way I did. But then I moved to Florida. Right after college, so I was right out of school and working at a resort down on the beach in Fort Myers, and super fun time, and of course there's a kind of a carefree environment when you're just living on the beach and bar hopping around the beach all the time after hours, after work and stuff. Well, so this is where it gets a little crazy. My roommate and I had moved into an apartment together just off the beach, and we were both 23 years old, a year out of school, and she started dating a guy that worked and lived both in the same apartment complex as us. Um, their relationship went super fast. They were engaged within 6 months. And he was definitely very clingy, very possessive, very controlling. Um, but we were young and I didn't really know how to process that, or that it was anything that I needed to really be concerned with. It was her deal. Well, anyway, over 4th of July right before 4th of July weekend, it was July 3rd, 1992. She broke up with him and said, I need a break. I'm really not sure that this is going to work out. It might still, I'm not saying it won't, but I need more time. We're going too fast. I really want to take some time and just consider this and make sure I'm making the right decision. Well, he flipped out and he killed her. He murdered her in our apartment. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So I always get kind of, it's a hard story to tell, but I think for me, it's an important story. And so like I said, it was July 2nd was when they broke up. July 3rd, that morning, I went to work. She had the day off because it was a Friday right before the 4th of July weekend. And she had the day off, so she was staying home. I went to work. And when I left for work that morning, he was out in the parking lot of our apartment complex. And he worked in the apartment complex, so I didn't think much of it. And he said, hey, Chris, is, Dawn up yet? And I said, no, she's still sleeping. And he's like, okay, well, you have a good day. And I'm like, you have a good day. And, off I went to work and didn't think anything of it. I thought, well, he probably wants to talk to her. He's really upset. They still probably need to work through some things. But that was all that I thought of. Went to work. I came home. Her car was gone. And so I assumed she wasn't home. I came in the apartment. Everything was pretty normal. There was a message on the answering machine from her dad, asking her to call him as soon as she got there. This is answering machines, no cell phones. This is back in the day, but had an answering machine message. And so I left the message for her. I changed my clothes. I was going to the movies with a friend. I made myself a sandwich for dinner. I did the dishes. I cleaned up the kitchen and I left and I went to the movies. And I came back and I got home and her car was still gone, but there was more messages from her dad on the answering machine. So I'm like, well, something must be going on, with her family or something that they're trying to get a hold of her. And so I changed, got ready for bed. And shortly thereafter, there was a knock on my front door from a policeman. And I went to the door and I was like, how can I help you? And He's like, "Are you Dawn Schneider?" And I said, "No, that's my roommate." And he said, "Your roommate?" He said, "Is she home?" And I said, "No, I haven't seen her all day and all evening." And he said, "Well, do you know where she is?" And I said, "No, her car's gone. She hasn't been home." And he said, "Well, how was she when you last saw her?" And I'm like, "Well, she was okay. She just broken up with her boyfriend, but she was all right." And he said, "Boyfriend? Would you do you know her boyfriend?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, would you recognize him from a picture if you saw one?" And I said, "Yeah." So he comes inside so he could have better lighting because he was outside. And he pulls out a picture, and it was her boyfriend, just his face on a gurney, like he was dead. You could just tell it was like from a morgue or something, just a white sheet up to his neck and his face. And it wasn't gory or anything, but it was just his face. And I'm like, oh, like, sorry. Like he's dead. Like he killed himself over this whole thing. So I'm like, yeah, that's him. And I'm freaking out now because I'm like, she's gonna be so upset. And so he tells me to go and notify the apartment manager of what's going on. And so I think he just wanted to get me out of the apartment. And he's like, "Do you mind if I have a look around?" And I said, "No." And this whole time her bedroom door had been shut. I had not gone into her bedroom.
I was wondering.
I was so very thankful that I didn't. But he came down to the apartment a short while later, and he told us that, I was there with the apartment manager, and he said, "Your roommate has," and he's like, "I hate to tell you this." He said, "But your roommate was the victim of a homicide." And at 23 years old, just trying to process that, like, I've heard the word before, but what does that mean? And, he went on to say that her body had been found in the bedroom, that he had stabbed her. And she had been there all day, all evening. So when I had come home to get ready for work, do all of that, or to get ready to go to the movies after work, she had been in there. So, long story short, I mean, it was very traumatic. I was taken to the police station for questioning because I had been in the apartment and everything, and they're trying to piece together everything that happened. What had happened was, after he killed her, he took her car. He stole her car, and he went to a high-rise hotel, jumped off the roof, and killed himself that way. And he had the keys to the car in his pocket, and the car was registered to her dad. So the police kept calling her dad, trying to find her.
Oh my
And that's why
gosh.
he was calling her. So yeah, it was horrible. But anyway, like I said, it was very traumatic, obviously, for me as well, because this all happened in my apartment. I'm trying to figure out how to handle this. I'm 23 years old. I'm in Florida. I have no family down there. My grandparents lived about an hour or so away, and so I did have, some place to go if I needed it. But what how that impacted, this whole thing is about our drinking. After that, I had a very fatalistic, if you will, attitude of, this could be your last day. You don't know, when that could be. None of us know what the end game is, and how our life is going to play out. So just party, have a good time. And it was really, I just was trying to escape. I really didn't want to process it. I didn't know how to process
No.
it. I was young, and I don't think at that time mental health was as big of a deal as it is now. And I don't think there was as much awareness. So the focus was all on her and the fact that she was killed, obviously, and how traumatic that was for her and her family. But I was just the roommate, and I was, lucky to be alive, that he didn't try to do something while I was there, was what I kept hearing. "Well, you're lucky he didn't do it while you were around." And so, you kind of have like a little bit of survivor's guilt, a little bit of what did I miss? Should I have been more aware? All those things. And so I think my way of coping with it was just, like I said, party like it's 1999. And that's literally what I did for the next couple years, just to kind of escape. And so then, long story short, again, it is a long story, but that's the part of it that shortly thereafter, 2 years later, I was 25, and I found out I was pregnant. And that was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it made my husband and I, he wasn't my husband then, we were just dating, but it made us get serious. It made me settle down. It made me like try to put all that chapter behind me and focus on raising a child and making those decisions and those commitments. And like I said, so for all those years, for 20 years, I focused on that and then we had we got married, we had 2 more kids. We've been together this whole time. I call him my rock because he got me through a lot of stuff. But I think, again, I put everything aside. I didn't deal with any of that because I just focused on having a family. So then coming back to it now, here at 53 years old, where I was 2 years ago, I think it was there was some of this stuff was kind of seeping out. I think it was some of this stuff was just coming back up because I had time and I was in a different place now to kind of process some of those things that had happened so long ago. And my kids are now in their 20s. And I think that was also very triggering for me. Like, what are they doing? What are they putting themselves? What kind of situations are they in and stuff? So that was a hard time.
So going back a little bit, so early 20s, she was your roommate.
Yep.
Like, were you guys like, not that it's like any traumatic experience is terrible, but was she like a really good friend, or was she just a roommate? Or
she was. I mean, we hadn't known each other that long. She was from Wisconsin, and we both had been down there. We both had, when we moved into the apartment, it was in December of the previous year. I had moved down in May of the previous year, so I'd been down there so I'd known her about 7 months when we moved in together, and she had an apartment with like 4 or 5 others that were all living together, and I think it was just a crowd, and she was like, it'd be nice to get out of this apartment with so many people and just get into something smaller. So it was a 2-bedroom apartment that we found together. I had been doing like an internship when I first got down there, so I wasn't getting paid a whole lot. I was living with an aunt who lived down there for a period of time, and so my aunt had actually decided to move out of the town, out of the area. So it was like, okay, I need an apartment. I need to find a place to live. I'm now committing to staying down here full time. And it just worked out, the 2 of us. So yes, we were friends. We weren't like super tight, but we were, we hung out together. We had mutual friends. We had, places that we enjoyed going together.
So what did you do in that like 24 to 48 hours
after she was killed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So after she was killed, like I said, when the officer came down when I was talking to the apartment manager and said, your roommate's been a victim of a homicide, he said, would you mind coming with us for questioning and, helping us understand, this whole situation? So I went back to my apartment with the police officer, and he introduced me to the detective that was going to be working the case, because they'd called in. Now there was all these cop cars and everything there. And so I couldn't take anything with me. I was in a tank. I had a gray volleyball league tank top on. I remember this clearly, and pink and white striped boxer shorts that I learned to bed. And I couldn't take my purse. I couldn't go put on a bra because I was, like I said, getting ready for bed. He let me grab a pair of flip-flops, and that was it. So I'm off to the police department with him, riding in his cruiser, as, he pulled out the tape recorder and starts, kind of asking me questions about her and their relationship and all of this stuff. And, took me down to the police station, where I was in, what you see on TV, an interrogation room with, a few chairs and a table, just sitting there trying to figure out what the heck is going on. And, I knew at that point, of course, that she was dead and that he was dead, but I didn't know like what all had happened or how it had happened. So yeah. And so then I stayed there till like 4:00 in the morning, and they released me, and I honestly think that they didn't believe I was the killer, but the fact that I'd been in the apartment, and that I also probably knew the most information about the whole situation as anybody.
But that has to be such a terrifying feeling, because
absolutely,
like, you never know. Like, are they gonna blame you? And your life is ruined, but that's
yeah, there was all of that. There was all of that, and there was all of the whole, a lot of, like I said, kind of the guilt of, what should I have been looking for? What did I miss? Could I have prevented this? What are they thinking about me? Are they judging me? Are they, thinking that I was, somehow to blame, that this was allowed to happen? Did I know something? Did I let it happen? Was I a third party accomplice? Well, there's all those
Yeah.
things that they're trying to figure out. So, they asked me what my relationship with him was. What did I know about him? Was there any drugs involved? It was just everything. So, so then I finally did get released about 4 o'clock. So I had to call a friend to try to come pick me up. Which she did, and it was somebody that I worked with. But this was supposed to be 4th of July weekend, which is our busiest weekend of the summer. And here I am now, in a boxer short and tank tops that I can't do anything. And so, and plus, the whole situation. So I had to call off work and say, I can't come in because I'm involved in a murder investigation. I mean, it's just murder suicide type thing. So yeah, that was rough. And so I wasn't able to get into my apartment because it was, again, 4th of July weekend. So I don't know if they had skeleton crew working or what, but it wasn't until later, like Monday or Tuesday, maybe even later than that I was finally able to get in my apartment, that they let me in to get like my purse, my stuff, my things. So, so I had something that I could, start to put my life back together. So,
Gosh.
yeah.
So
And
did
then
you move out of the apartment?
I did move out of the apartment. I didn't get my security deposit back because of all the stuff that happened. And of course, we're breaking our lease and everything.
That's sorry,
Yeah.
totally different
I
topic.
know.
That seems like complete bullshit.
Tell me about it. But, again, here I was at 23 years old. I had no idea what to do, So
Yeah.
you go to the apartment managing company and they're like, their hands are tied. This is they did bring in a cleaning company to come and like clean everything out, clean up the scene and stuff, her bedroom. And so, I did get back into the apartment, maybe like a week later to pack up stuff. I mean, I had to pack up all my stuff. Her parents came down to, I had to take her parents to the records bureau, whatever you want to call it, to get her death certificate because they didn't know the area and stuff. So I had to go with them to, and again, this is no cell phones then. So we didn't have GPS. So they didn't know how to get anywhere. So I at least knew the area a little bit. So went with them and talk about, I mean, just again, that feeling of here I am facing her parents and I'm the roommate and like what is going through their mind about me and this whole situation and stuff. So yeah, it was a lot.
I kudos to you for not continuing drinking through your 20s once you started having kids because that's very traumatic and
Yeah.
I don't know how a lot of people handle that.
Yeah.
But now since you're sober,
Mm-hmm.
you're reliving it in a different
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were sober when you had kids, but
Right.
you were in a different life
Well, yeah.
then. But now it's like, holy crap, like looking back and like how did
Yeah,
you feel like on that?
I agree. I think I'm finally I think I finally processed stuff that I did not process back then because I felt too guilty or I felt like, everything, I felt like everything needed to be about her. She was the victim. She was the one who lost her life. Her life was taken at 23 years old. And that was a tragic story. So I think I felt like everything needed to focus on her and not on me. And so for those years, that's what it was. And like I said, now I think for 20 years, like I said, raising my kids, I really just compartmentalized that and just put it aside and I did everything to keep myself busy so that I didn't have to think about it. And I don't know that I knew I was doing that. I don't know that I did that intentionally, but it was just a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And so again, now as my kids started getting older, and started, dating and started going out and doing things that I couldn't control, that's when it started really coming back at me.
I, yeah. I mean, I have
Mhm.
little kids, but I couldn't
Mhm.
even imagine, and I feel like I would be the same way. Like that's how you cope. Like
Yeah,
you're gonna
it
drive
is.
your
You kind of throw yourself into whatever you can to divert yourself, or at
and
least that was how I did it.
and do they know your story?
Yes.
So they
Yes.
know like if mom calls me, like maybe I should text her because now I can
Yeah.
text her. Like
Still where I am and what's happening. Um, yes, they do. And to be honest, you would think that it was I have two girls and a boy. My two daughters, the two oldest ones, you would think were the harder ones, because they were daughters, that I would have had more fear. But honestly, I didn't. And maybe they just communicated with me better, or we had a different relationship. But by the time my son, who was my youngest, got to that age, I think his friends and his stuff, they were just a little bit more risk takers, and they were more into they ride dirt bikes. They're more into the party scene. They're doing some other things that to me make me really nervous and bring on the anxiety. And so I think
boys.
that just boys, yeah, boys just by it just took on a whole nother level. So that was what put me over the edge, I think.
So that first year of sobriety, you didn't really focus on that. Your second year of
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
sobriety is when you've been focusing, dealing with this. Have you like what has gotten you through those deep, like those darker moments?
Yeah, I'd say the first year, like I said, I focused on giving up alcohol and making those changes. But I thought that was going to make me feel all better. Like life would be wonderful, all my anxiety would go away. Everything, that I read that was probably the key that would help, and it did.
Yeah.
It helped tremendously. But it also helped me identify what really also triggered me and what it was when I was getting freaked out by things. And there were a few times that I really did freak out over stuff. And so I think I was able to better trace what was happening and why, and come to the come to the root cause of it. So yeah, I actually did start going to therapy. And the first therapy that I did was one that was online. It was like a remote, virtual, not virtual, but it was a remote session. And she, the therapist that I met with, told me that it was PTSD. And I guess that had never crossed my mind, like
Yeah.
that's what it was, and it wasn't an extreme case, but it was a little bit of it.
But
And so
I feel like thanks for bringing that up. I feel like anybody's PTSD, just because it's not as bad as somebody else's, it still matters. Like my friend and I have gone through trauma, but different traumas. And my husband, it's like we all three have way different traumas, but like nobody's as worse or better than the others. Like we all have to
no,
deal with it because I'm never gonna feel what she feels. I'm never gonna know what my husband's going through. And like they don't know what I go through. Like
right,
so it's all different. And
it's
yours
all
is
different.
way different too.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, it was more of a feeling. It was more of like, how do I feel when I'm in this kind of an environment? It wasn't like flashbacks or things that would, and that's why I guess I never thought that that's what it was. But it was just that I found what I have found about myself, and my kids will tell you this, my husband, that I'm kind of a control freak. And I think that that's because I feel like I need to control the environment that I'm in, or when I feel out of control is when I feel that that being triggered. Like I just get super anxious and super,
Mhm.
just uneasy. And so and so I was able to start identifying when that was happening. And so like I said, I went and got the diagnosis of PTSD, and that helped because then I'm like, okay, well, I have a word for this now. I have a description. I have a reason. I have a what's happening. But then I didn't like doing it online. I didn't like doing the Zoom meeting to do it and stuff. It just wasn't very effective for me. So I did find somebody locally and started working with them. And so I worked with her. We did the EMDR therapy and some stuff for about 6 months. And that helped a lot. And it just helped me work through some stuff and just how I reacted, just understanding like how I'm wired and how I reacted to it and what caused me to react that way and stuff helped tremendously.
EMDR
And
is so amazing. I wish more people would do it. It's uncomfortable and it
oh, it's very
sucks.
uncomfortable. Yes.
There's many times I would change the subject, be like, I don't really want to do this today, pretty much, because I don't like it, but
No.
I know that it's helpful.
Yes, it did. It helped me a lot. And it just gave me some peace, I think, and some ability to work through that. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's been this past that I've kind of finished that up this last summer. And then the other thing, and this is just due to my age being 55 and you're a lot younger, but just beware, menopause like is no joke either. So I think those menopause hormones on top of everything else, I was like, I'm just like a train wreck here. So getting on some hormone replacement therapy and doing some of that stuff helped as well. So it's been like this concoction of things, but I think this year two, I think year two is when I work through all of those things and I feel like a different person. I swear, like I mentally feel like a different person than I did a year ago.
And I think for a lot of us, that first year is just getting through it. Just literally, I reached, like you said, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months. It's about the numbers.
Yeah.
And just figuring it out. And then that second year, we're like, this is why I drink. Or this. And then we have to like work
that.
on those and fix it and dive deeper. And it's like, ew, it's ugly. It's like not comfortable and it hurt. It's hurtful.
Yeah,
and
it is.
because you have to relive a lot of things and realize what caused you, who caused you, and like just it's not a fun feeling. And I wish more people would understand, like, if you can get through the first year just figuring out how to be sober, and at that second year really just dive into why was I drinking and what caused me to drink so much, and heal yourself, not turn back to alcohol, because that's not solving anything. That didn't solve anything where you did it. Like,
no,
just made it
alcohol
worse.
was an escape for me. Alcohol was I'm stressed. I'm, just having a crazy time at work, or kids are, doing stuff. I just need to let loose and get out and go socialize and go to the bar, or go do whatever, and let my hair down. And then, and then I would say something stupid, or then I would act in a way that just didn't feel good. And the next day, then I would feel like crap. And then I would just be on this vicious cycle of repeating that. So, yeah, it was, I knew though, I just knew I needed to make a change. And I know that I had this stuff I needed to deal with. And I just thought, well, if I get rid of alcohol, that will fix everything. And no, that didn't fix it.
Were there any tools for that first year that got you through not drinking?
I was a huge NA person. So NA beers got me through so many events, NA wine. And, if I had any advice for anybody out there in the audience, if you will, that having those non-alcoholic options for people was huge, because I just wanted to fly under the radar. I wasn't really like ready to tell my story. I didn't want to get into the whole reason why I was drinking or not drinking. And I felt like I could just fit in more if I had a beer in my hand, even though it was NA, I could put it in a koozie or whatever and not draw much attention to it and just look like I was doing my thing as everybody else was. And
isn't it so stupid?
Yeah, it's so stupid, but I was totally that way.
I get it. I mean, I feel you, but like when you say it like that, I'm like, it's so stupid that we have to like fit in because we're out drinking. Like,
yeah, I didn't want to answer any questions. I didn't want to like, why are you drinking tonight? What's going on?
Mind your own business.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I definitely used my Stanleys and my Yetis and everything as much as I could when I was, at cookouts or at people's houses or whatever, and just try to fly under the radar with it. I just wasn't ready. Once I had maybe 90 days, 6 months, I was feeling more confident, then I was more open about it. But those first 90 days, I'm like, yeah, I'm not saying anything. No, I'm not bringing this up. Nobody needs to know. This is just me figuring out if I can even do this. I did not want to be that person that was like, I'm doing this and then fail. And then be like, well, I thought you weren't drinking and now you are. I just didn't want to do it. So
explaining yourself to people and then feeling like not only are you failing yourself, but you're failing like the ones that were watching you. That's
right.
I don't know. It's a weird feeling.
It's a weird thing.
Yeah, it's so weird. So you obviously had support from your husband.
Yes.
And does he? We don't have to talk about family too much, but does he drink or?
Yeah, he does. He was never a big drinker, and so like I said, we went 20 years without hardly drinking. We drank, we drank at weddings, we drank at events, birthday parties, stuff like that. We just didn't drink regularly for 20 years, and so I think that's been something that both of us have tried to juggle as our kids have gotten older. What is the what does it look like for us? But that really hasn't been too much of an issue between it. There've been a few discussions we've had, but nothing earth shattering.
A lot of people ask, and I don't know because I didn't stop first. A lot of people ask, well, if your husband, what's the question? Pretty much, if my husband was still drinking, would it be hard for me? And I'm like, I don't know. In the beginning, probably, but look, like as of right now, no. If he decided to crack a beer open, I'd be annoyed with him, like he was annoyed with me when I would drink. But I mean, it wouldn't.
Yeah, it wasn't so hard the first year for me, honestly, because I was so focused on myself. The second year, there were times that I was like, I felt like I really wish I could be having a drink, and you are. And so can we just not do this because, it just makes me feel left out, or like it just kind of felt like it was something I couldn't not that and I know he wasn't intentionally like rubbing in my face that he was drinking. That was not at all what he was doing, but at times that's how I took it. And so,
but nobody said you can't drink. You chose, this is what you want.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but it's like, I've chosen this, but it's still hard when you're drinking in front of me. And like
put it in your face and they're like, oh,
sure, have this. Passing it back before at the official restaurant, it's like going between you because the bucket of beer is right in front of you. But yeah, and it's not, like I said, it wasn't that big of a deal, but we have had a few conversations about, what works.
Yeah. And which is normal. I mean, like I honestly really was irritating when I was still drinking and he wasn't. He quit 2 months before me. And there was lots of conversations. But it took me a while. Obviously, it took me 2 months or 2.5 months to quit also. And it wasn't fun in the beginning.
Right.
But, I mean, our relationship was built on alcohol and now we're rebuilding sober.
Yeah.
So like your kid, and then looking back, you're about the same age difference between your kids as like our parents and stuff. I remember when I first turned 21, it was all about going out and having drinks with our parents. But like looking back, I'm like, but why does it have to be about alcohol?
Right.
Why did it ever have to be all about alcohol?
It's like a rite of passage or something. I don't know. But yeah, I did that with my kids too when they, especially my girls when they first turned 21 and stuff. And it was just how it was. And the same, like I said, my son, he likes to, he's in the Air Force, so they drink a lot, and and that's a whole nother level of stress, him being in the Air Force. So yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, my son the other night, we were watching Interstellar, I don't know, whatever, and the grandpa or the dad was drinking a beer, and he's like, "That looks good," and I was like, "What?" Like, yeah. Boys are so much different.
Yes, they are. And I'm really tried to not impose, what I'm dealing with on anybody else, but there's a dynamic to it. It changes, mom's not drinking now, and people are, everybody's aware of that. So, it does change
So
the
are
dynamic.
you the type that couldn't stop at one?
Yes. Yeah. I did not have an off switch. Once I started, it was tough to stop.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I shouldn't say damn, it wasn't a reliable off switch. Sometimes I could, if I was at a business event or something, I knew my environment, I knew what my limits were. But if I was, in the right state, or the right environment, the right state of mind, yeah. Just once I started, I didn't stop.
Same. And I feel like for a lot of us, when people
Mhm.
are like, oh, you didn't have a problem, it's like, I had a problem turning that switch off.
Rough.
And that's why I
Absolutely.
can't drink. And I can't
Yeah.
have one, I can't have a sip. So it'll take me right back down.
Correct.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's terrible. Like, yeah, I mean, of course, there's your people that are normal drinkers, but I mean, I wasn't a raging alcoholic. I just had a problem.
Yeah.
So similar to you, it was
Yeah.
you were mentally dependent on it.
Yes. And it was one, like I said, and the frequencies were happening more and more because with no kids around, those had kind of been my guide rails or guardrails that kept me on a certain momentum or a certain path. But without them, I was very involved in a lot of things from a business standpoint. So there was a lot of business networking events, and every business networking event has beer and wine and drinks and stuff there. So there'd be business events during the week, and then there'd be stuff with my friends on the weekends. And it just seemed like what used to be, a once or twice a night was once or twice a week was now turning into 3 or 4 times a week. And that was just, it was too much. And I couldn't go to an event and not have a drink. I didn't know how to do that.
Right?
Mhm.
What do you do for work?
I'm in sales and marketing.
Okay. Anything
Yes.
salesy, I swear
Yep.
it's all about alcohol.
Yep, it is. So every type of business networking event, and I go to a lot of them. That's there.
Yeah.
And that's where I wanted that NA glass of wine just to have in my hand that looked like everybody else's glass of wine, but
Just slide it behind the bar.
instead he's just water bottle that I had to carry around. Look, or my Pepsi that they. And I'm like, no.
I mean, you could just slip the bartender and be like, "Hey, can you just serve this to me?"
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I wish there was. I think there's becoming more of a presence with
Yes.
NAs in more places. I love going to restaurants that have like the zero proofs, the teetotal. Like they all have a different name for them, but it's still fun.
Yeah.
And I had friends over last night and we were talking about it. I'm like, I'm still the one and only one that gets a drink at dinner. It's just no alcohol now.
Yeah.
It's still fun.
I just ordered a bottle of wine for Thanksgiving. That's a NA wine, but just because it's a good one. But yeah, and I just feel like I don't want to be left out. I don't want to feel like I'm deprived. Like I have to drink water while everybody else has a fun, interesting adult drink, and I have to drink from the kids' table, or the kids' menu. That just doesn't work for me.
Would you like some apple juice?
Yeah, or Shirley Temple. Here you go. So no.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So you like heavily relied on the NAs
Yes.
to get you through.
Yes.
And what are events like for you nowadays?
Now I'm fine with it. Now I'm used to it. Now it doesn't bother me so much. But in that first year, I really wanted it. But now I'm good. The other thing that was really important to me too was a sense of community, because I didn't have any friends that were going down the same journey as I was. I didn't have people that were also giving up alcohol like I was. So, for me, I found Sober Instagram, and that was huge. Finding people on there that were on the same journey and just connecting and seeing the, commonalities and common challenges that we were all facing.
Yeah, because you and Margie follow each other.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
What is your, can you tell us your handle?
Sure. Well, it has been growing.comfortable. So it was all about growing comfortable in this space. And I started it a year ago, July. And that was, for me, it was a real, like kind of my testing space of like, the narrative, like, how do I explain this? How do I explain what I'm feeling, the different stages I'm going through, finding words and kind of testing it before I actually said it out loud to anybody that I knew. I could kind of put it out there to people I didn't know and see what kind of feedback I got from it. And, that was helpful for me. And it's kind of funny this timing. So today, that was hacked. It's still there. I can't right now. I can't get into it. So it's kind of pissing me off, but I've also been thinking lately that it's time to kind of merge and to bring that side into again, this is all, but my whole journey has been about being more authentic and really getting to know myself. And I feel like it's time to bridge that and bring that into me, into Chris. Like, this is who I am, and be more open about it. I have been very open about it with my friends and with people that I know in the community. But it's just something I'm slowly starting to feel like now's the time. It's time to just, like, I can take those training wheels off maybe and go full speed.
Yeah. Well, and I think having a community, whether it's online or in person, I think is very, very important. And like you said, your social circle wasn't changing.
Right.
And it's hard when your social circle doesn't change, whether that's quitting anything, quitting sugar, quitting caffeine, quitting alcohol. Like, it doesn't matter. Somebody's making a change, and somebody's going to dislike it.
Yeah. Right. For sure.
But
for sure.
Like, has your social circle changed a lot, or?
No, I have to say that it really hasn't. I think at first it confused people, because like you said, people didn't really see that I had a problem, and my drinking looked like everybody else's drinking that I was hanging around with. So, it was not a big deal to anyone except for me. So at first I think it just confused people, like why I was doing this. But I think once I started to be more open about some of the stuff I was dealing with and how it was affecting me, and started going to therapy and some, kind of getting more honest. It took me a long time to get honest. I think I had been in denial for such a long time with what was really happening inside, and covering it up. I was so used to covering it up that, once I started really explaining why I was doing what I was doing, then I had the full support of everyone around me. So I've been very blessed to keep all the friendships that I've got, and to, be able to navigate that pretty well.
You said being open. So when I was researching, there's this, oh my gosh, I'm losing the words. HOW. I cannot think of the word. So it's honest, open, and willing when it comes to sobriety, and that's what's going to help you get through, because you have to be honest about it. You have to be open. You have to be willing to tell your story, because you're not gonna get anywhere unless you have those tools.
Correct. Yeah, and I've learned that. I've had to learn that, because that was not. I was very good at covering things up. I was very good at keeping a wall, and so taking that down and being open, and that's why I did that whole Instagram thing. I had to get used. It was like a testing ground for me to kind of get used to being open about things, and it was scary. It was really scary to put some of that stuff out there.
It is, but it helps keep you going. I feel like. I mean, I don't know if you ever watched my very first video, The Drinker. It shot up. It took 2 weeks for it to catch on, but all of a sudden it got 300,000 views. And all the comments that I got from people about how they related and all that stuff, I was like, oh my gosh.
Right.
It just filled me. And I'm like, it's awkward telling my story, but hey, that's real, and people like real.
It is. Yeah, and that's that whole authentic thing. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, and I read her book in my first year about being vulnerable and being, again,
power of vulnerability.
The power of vulnerability, and it was like, okay, I can do this. So I can be open, and that was something that I was never vulnerable. I was never gonna let that stuff out. So that's something that I've really had to practice.
I just got done listening to that audiobooked for the second time.
Yeah.
Because my therapist actually recommended I listen to that like a couple years ago. And then I don't know why I re-listened to it, but Codependent No More is a really good one too. I don't know.
I haven't read that one, but I'm trying to think which was the one that I had. There's a lot.
Oh, well, that one's not Brene Brown, but that one's a Melanie Bateman. I think that's her name. But yeah, it's like being vulnerable, putting yourself out there. And I mean, like, what advice would you give to somebody that is starting this journey or scared to quit or doesn't know where to start?
I would say baby steps. Don't, future tripping is a real thing. Don't try to, take on too much and say, I'm quitting for good, right now, because that just seems impossible to say I'm quitting for good. And so, again, for me, it worked in doing small chunks of time. Like I'm going to do 30 days and see how that goes. And I'll maybe do 60 or then 90 or whatever, and just keep pushing my date and stuff. And then I just would say, well, I'm just going to reassess when I get to that, 100-day mark or whatever, and see how I feel if I'm going to keep going and not put that pressure on myself. Cause it really is that whole, I know it sounds so cliche, but that one day at a time. And I never understood that or appreciated that until, you really get into it. And then eventually you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm good. I don't see myself going backwards, but you just never know. There's going to be something that could trigger you, something that happens and then those are learning experiences, and you learn what triggers you and how to navigate through it. And, I'm a firm believer too in getting outside, going for walks, exercise, do different things to get your mind off of it. That was big for me. And, journaling. I did a ton of journaling. But I'm a writer. I like to write things out and get it out of my head, because it will just keep spiraling if I don't get it out.
That is one thing they say to do in therapy. She told me to burn and write, or write and burn. Write what I'm feeling and then burn it, and it really does help.
I've never burned it. I've always held on to it, so maybe I need to burn some of it. But I think writing helps a lot.
Yeah, and because you're open on the paper.
Yeah. There's nobody has to read it. That's just all you.
Yeah. I love how everybody that I've talked to in the last probably week all says the same thing. Get outside, go for walks, listen or read books. I mean, it is, and journal. I mean, so many important things to getting sober that it is one day at a time, but you actually have to do the work.
Yeah. And I think like podcasts like this, I think podcasts like the Quit Lit, I mean, all of it, just to feel like there's other people that have been through this, and this isn't just something you are trying to figure out all on your own, that there's other people that have made it through.
Yeah. And then people when I get people to come on and share their stories, I mean, your story's different than somebody else's, and somebody might resonate with you and be like, oh my gosh, that happened to me. And maybe they won't tell me, but maybe they'll actually go get help. Right. And, realize, something from their early 20s so tragic, like they have to work on, even though they're 60 years old now.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're 60, but it doesn't matter what age
or what age you are when it really starts taking effect,
Because it's not like it was childhood trauma for you. It was literally your early 20s, something that I don't even have words for that, because I couldn't even imagine how you felt.
Right.
I mean, and then you held on to that for all these years. And then once your kids hit a certain age, it triggered you back to drinking. And good for you for working on yourself. I mean,
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
That's amazing. And I really appreciate you sharing your story.
It's a story. So, it's not your typical one. It doesn't come up in conversation. So,
do you talk to people open about it? Like, around?
I do more now, honestly, than I used to. I used to probably for years. The only time it did come up was probably when I was drinking, because I did not talk about it. So, no, and not very often anyway. I bet there's a lot of people that don't even know that this is my story if they hear this. But yeah. So I think that, like you just said, that stuff it just stays there. It doesn't go away. You know, it's that the body holds a score or whatever that is, that the body keeps score. It just stays in you until you get it out. And so, yeah, I've gotten a lot more comfortable talking about it and talking through it in the last year or so than I had been for a long time.
I mean, a lot of people I feel like don't talk about their PTSD. Like my husband wouldn't talk about it unless he was drunk.
Right.
I mean, he talks about it more now. I mean, being sober for over 2 years. Or here's like a year and a half. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the only time that you felt comfortable talking about something so tragic was you had to have a drink in your hand. But people don't realize that quitting drinking and that is part of healing.
That definitely is. Yes.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? For sure.
Do you plan on taking your sobriety journey to the next?
Yes. So like I said, my Instagram did get hacked right now, but my regular Instagram is C Dingus, which is me genuinely, just my personal Instagram. So that one is live. I can access that one. So that one's still going on. So I may be making some changes to that. My mission right now, or my goal, my objective, I'm working on writing a book. So with everything that, I have gone through, I do feel like that's something I want to put into a book format. So I'm taking a class and taking a writing class right now, and kind of learning how to do this and do it professionally and stuff. So I'm pretty excited. I think this has been something I never would have done if I had kept drinking. So here I am on this whole journey to become a writer now, and where I'm going with that. So it's pretty exciting.
And maybe your book will turn into a movie.
I don't know. I'm not. For me, it's just more kind of. It goes back to, it's just another healing step of processing, in a whole different way.
But literally, when you were telling the story, I was like, "This is a movie." She's literally. This only happens in movies.
Yeah. This doesn't happen in real life. Yeah. Well, yeah.
And here you are living it, healing from it, and doing an amazing job at it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I can't wait to see where, when you get that book done and when it's released. Like,
I'll let you know.
Yeah. So everybody can go follow you on your personal page.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Dingus. So Dingess is my last name, Dingus. So C for Chris, and that's me.